Mr. Chairman, Singapore provides, amongst other things, tax incentives for MNCs to set up regional headquarters and other investments because they contribute towards our economy. SMEs, as the backbone of our economy, making up 72% of employment and 44% of added nominal value in 2019, also received support. But the pandemic has given us a sobering reminder that SMEs play on an unequal footing because of their smaller balance sheets and brand value. MNC investment is often attracted by incentive packages that include tax incentives and other forms of incentivization. These are tied to economic targets like total business spending, fixed asset investment, and headcount. As I argued in my budget speech, can incentive packages for MNCs include an additional tier of incentive if the MNC works with local SMEs in executing the investment project? This additional tier can be offered very selectively where there are good local SMEs that can be partners to MNCs, and it should be meant as a nudge and encouragement, not a mandate or diktat. There are schemes like PACT, PACT, which reward MNC and SME collaboration, just as there were schemes like LIUP in the past. But have our SMEs really grown into regional and global players helped by these schemes? In other countries in the region, MNCs are sometimes required to have a certain percentage of local equity. I am not advocating that at this point, as it may make us too uncompetitive to attract MNCs. Last but not least, do our economic agencies regularly audit these schemes to weigh the cost in terms of cash outlay and so on versus the benefit in terms of job creation and economic multipliers?
Mr. Leon Perera asked about the grants given to MNCs versus SMEs and suggested to tie a conditional incentive for MNCs to work with local SMEs. I'm glad Mr. Leon Perera shares our same philosophy. In the last 5 years, we gave around 13 billion to MNCs and 21 billion to SMEs. But looking merely at relative grant amounts versus returns and value adds overly simplifies this picture. First, the relationship between MNCs and local enterprises is often symbiotic. When MNCs here do well, they are more likely to work with local companies, source from them, and have them as part of their value chain and supply chains. We also encourage MNCs to work with SMEs through the PACT program, which supports knowledge transfer between larger companies and local SMEs or startup. And we will do more where it makes sense too. Second, our support for MNCs and SMEs serve to enhance their symbiotic relationship in various ways. MNCs are already best in class in their industry. Our support helps them to bring in new businesses and technology that will uplift our entire ecosystem and create higher value jobs here. For SMEs, we provide support for more fundamental purposes, digitalizing, penetrating new markets, streamlining work processes. As smaller businesses level up, they will also grow to become an integral part of the local supplier ecosystem for MNCs and beyond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one, and I thank all the Minister Chan and all the MTI office holders for their replies. Just one more general point of clarification, which I suppose I should direct to Mr. Tan See Leng, because he talked a lot about the take-up rate for various schemes like the ESG and so on. So I think that it is important for us to monitor these take-up rates, like the number of firms who have availed themselves of a scheme. I would like to ask the Minister, would he agree that that is not an effort indicator? And effort indicators are important. They are useful and we should measure them. But does the Ministry also measure outcome indicators? So what do I mean by outcome indicators? So at the end of the day, how many of these local companies are achieving a certain threshold in terms of shareholder value, in terms of market share in a particular product category, in terms of absolute revenue size, or so on? Now, I know that it is difficult to assess causation versus correlation. I know at the end of the day, the entrepreneur is responsible for delivering outcomes. The scheme is just an enabler, a facilitator. But would it not be useful for, and does the ministry actually do this to measure? At the end of the day, you have a pool of local companies who are benefited from various schemes. After a certain period of time, X number of these local companies have, attained these performance benchmarks and these thresholds, so that we know that we are sort of moving in the right direction, even if it's not possible to pinpoint causation.
On behalf of Minister Tan See Leng, because this is involved the whole MTI portfolio. The answer to Mr. Leon's question is definitely yes. We definitely benchmark what we achieve, not just from the input perspective, but from the output, and also most importantly, from the outcome perspective. And indeed, that is my guidance to all the MTI staff and our stat boards, that whenever we apply a scheme to any of the enterprises that we intend to help, let us not just look at the input, not just look at the output, but look at the outcome. And as Mr. Leon says, and we agree with him, that the outcome will depend on a multitude of factors. It may not be causal, but it will at least give us a sense. And that a sense of whether we are making progress. And that is why, during my speech, I mentioned that at every point in time, MTI is constantly reviewing our schemes to make sure that we apply the finite resources to the best use in order to grow our enterprise as an ecosystem. So, and where needs to, we will make some adjustments to the scheme, we will prune some of the scheme, and that are less relevant in order to redirect resources to schemes that are much more in need by the enterprises.